AROCK, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Dad Edge, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I am excited to have you on, my friend. So when I first when I first saw your team reach out to us for an interview, and I thought to myself, I was like, AROCK. I was like, that's fascinating. That's unique, right? So tell me how did this? I mean, I know your real name and everything, but tell me how AROCK even got started.
Yeah, I mean, I just recently got asked that question. It's funny because I've been going by AROCK for 23 years now. I got the trademark now, global trademark in many different countries. But it all started because before I opened up the business, I was a DJ. And
Yeah.
so I DJ for many years at a young age. And given that my first name's Angel, I figured, well, what can I go by, right? As a DJ, you always want to figure out like what that name's gonna be, what your DJ name's gonna be, and people would always tell me like, man, like you rocked the party, like you killed it, you crushed it, and I said, what if I just use my initial as Angel Rocks, and that's how it came about. Like it just my first letter of my name and then just rock the party. And
Right.
then as I continue getting into the music space and I realized that I wasn't just DJing, I was doing, a variety of things in the music space. I said, I'm just gonna drop the DJ and just go by A-Rock. And that's how it's been for a couple of years now. So
That is super cool, man. Wait, and you started DJing when you were like 12, right?
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Dude, that is cool, man. And what got you involved with this?
So I think so I want to say it's the first day I ever walked my middle school dance for the first time. It's funny because I'm just going through that with my I have a 12-year-old and he just got into middle school, so he's going to his first school dance. And he brought the paper of, it's a $2 per person and all that. So it gave me the flashback of when I went to my first middle school dance, because I feel like that's when you're introduced to the school dances, at least here in San Diego. And so when I first walked into the dance, I noticed that, it was all new to me. So like people dancing and people, just surrounding. Back in the days, like people used to battle with hard house music from Chicago and all that. So people used to battle. So they would create a circle and they would battle each other, with dances. And I'm 35, so I grew up in the when I went to middle school, it was the 2000s. And so I seen the DJ just bobbing his head and controlling the crowd. And I think that's what fascinated me. It's just the way the DJ was really controlling the crowd and being able to dictate like what was the next song going to be and how was that going to change people's reactions. And even till this day, I'm so fascinated by just the way that music connects with people's emotions in many different ways, whether you're watching a movie or you're having food at a restaurant. Like I'm just fascinated by the way music connects with people. Some people don't realize it, but yeah.
And what was your family? What was their response like growing up and wanting to do this?
So my dad was an architect. So my dad, he obviously just like any other parent, like I back in the days, like it wasn't common to say this is gonna be my career, right? This is what I want to do for a living. And so luckily for me, my dad was very supportive, like as far as getting me the equipment. And so when I was young, when I was 12 years old, I immediately said, I need to figure out what equipment he was using because I want to do the same thing. Go back home and start, trying to figure out like I've always been, if I want to figure something out, I've always been the type of person that I'm going to call 100 people and until I get that answer. And so I ended up getting my first piece of equipment. at Radio Shack, because Radio Shack was like the go-to place for electronics back in the days, and get my first piece of equipment. And his response was just, at first it's just a toy. Like, it's to him was just, okay, he's having fun. I don't know what he's doing, but he's having fun. His response started to change as I got older and I got into high school, and there was times where I would ditch class to go to the record store and discover new music, right? So that's when things started to change and started to be like, he started to think more like, hey, like, this is like, you need to get an actual career, you know what I mean, going. So yeah, I mean, that was the first take on their response. My mom was always just neutral. Like, my mom was just, whatever you do, like, I support it.
So how did that cause between you and your dad, right? Because I think as we grow up, even young sons that we're raising now, daughters that we're raising right now, as a parent, depending on where you came from and depending on your mindset, you look at these interests of your kids and you're like, oh man, that could be really dangerous. Like, I want to make sure that I keep him or her away from that. Like, that could really fall flat. I'm not really sure. Like, and we do that, out of protection. Did this create any type of, tension between you and your dad?
At times, I want to say at times it did, for sure. As I got older and I would get into trouble or I wouldn't want to go to school, like, he would then just circle back to that. Like, he would circle back. That's the reason why. And this is why it's not good. This needs to be your main focus. So it was definitely at times, because I want to say that music really kept me home. It kept me wanting to make music, wanting to mix music in my room. And as opposed to most of the teenagers, they wanted to be out at parties. And so that kind of kept me grounded, I would say, like, growing up. But then early on, like, I started DJing for actual, like, house parties and friends and family members. I want to say like 13, if not 12. So very early on, and I'm super thankful for those opportunities, because I felt like that helped me understand, like, how to work with people and how to really learn the business aspect of things at a very young age. Because what most people don't understand is, like, okay, yeah, it's one thing to go and play music at a party, but it's like, how are you handling the payments? How are you working with them prior to the party and post party? Like, all of those logistics, I learned those trades at a very young age, and that kind of helped me, and later on in life.
What type of people skills were you learning at such a young age that have really served you today?
I mean, the number one thing was just customer service, right? Because, again, I'm playing music, but at the end of the day, I am providing a service to a client, whether if it was a family member or a friend. And so customer service was the big one, like, just how to deal with clients and provide good service in return for, what you were providing. So,
are there certain elements of customer service that were more meaningful to you? Like, just some really aha moments, like, just maybe it was the way you talked to people, it was the way you treated people, it was your deliverables. Like, what do you still use today that you learned as a kid?
I think I want to say putting yourself in other people's shoes and just really taking the time to really hear their perspective, and even if you're not right, like, you got to figure out a way to deliver the message so that either they kind of understand where you're coming from as well, or if not, just not necessarily give it their way, but at the end of the day, it's like, you want to have there's more value in having a happy customer than there is taking their money. And that was always the biggest thing for me when I started the business. It was never about making money. It was about, for me, the goal was how can I get thousands of users to use my product? Like that was more valuable to me than how do I get 100 people to pay me, and so, yeah.
That's really cool. So it's really delivering value. And it also sounds like from an interactive perspective, maybe it made you an empathetic listener and being able to deliver what maybe that customer expected me. And in certain situations, communication and maybe even empathy didn't necessarily mean agreement, right? Because we don't have to necessarily agree with somebody that we're interacting with, but to meet them where they're at and how they feel and what's going on in their mind and being able to reflect back. It sounds like maybe that was one of the skills. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
That's, if you really think about that, I mean, you said you're 35, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I never, we never learned those interactive communication skills, relationship skills, and in school or anything like that, and we're just sort of like, it's baptism by fire. And then I think what happens too is, as we interact with even people who are intimately close to us, like our wives, our kids, siblings, parents, all these things, even our teams, right? If we're business owners, people we work with, we don't necessarily know these communication skills, especially not at that age. Have you noticed? And if so, not have you noticed, because I'm sure you have, but how have you noticed that some of these skill sets have spilled over into maybe how you interact with your wife or friends?
Oh man, it's even with friends, because as busy as my schedule is, like I make time for those friends, and I most people, they reach a certain level where they have success, and then they don't make that time, for what they call the little people, right? And in a sense, for me, it's just about, um, just trying to give time to everybody. I've always been a person that I treat everybody equally. Like there's been times where, you see me hanging around with Kamala Harris, but yet, I'm having dinner with, a high school friend. And so to me, I've always treated people equally. It doesn't matter like what industry they're in, and my vendors, my friends, my family, like I treat them equally, and I think that's important, because that's really what helps open up even more doors, right? Like people then get to meet you and they say, "Oh wow, like we see this person here and there, and yet he's a completely different person once you meet him." And I get that a lot. I get that a lot from, whether it's drivers that I use or any of that. They always, people that are always working with many different high level people, they always circle back to, like, most people that we work with, they don't have your personality. They get to a certain extent, and then, they treat us a certain way.
It's fascinating that you say that, because as soon as we jumped on, like, I mean, I like to say I'm not good at a lot, but I am good at reading people. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's because I've done almost 1,000 of these interviews to date, and I've interviewed some absolutely amazing people. But I also spent, almost 20 years in sales and interacting with customers, and, learned a lot about psychology along the way. And so I tend to think that I'm a pretty good read of people. And as soon as we jumped on this interview, before we even hit record, I was like, man, this, you just seem like an everyday just type of guy, right? Just an everyday guy.
Yeah.
You definitely give off that vibe and that persona. Are there things in your life that you notice, or maybe it goes back to your childhood, just things that keep you very grounded or very humbled?
Um, for one, yeah, like I'm first generation, so for me, I always circle back, humble beginnings, and um, just I always remind myself of like the struggles of, where I started, and where I am now. I do gotta say, one of my biggest things is sometimes I don't look where I'm at. And I think that's what kind of gives me the grounded level. So most people say like, hey, like, don't you think you have enough? Like, you want to reach for the next level. You should try to enjoy the moment or where you're at now. And I feel like for me, it's not, I haven't reached, my goal, and what that goal is it's kind of hard to explain, because once you get there, it's like you're on to the next goal, right? So I honestly think that's what also helps me stay grounded, is that I don't really see like where I'm at. To me, I'm just Angel from San Diego, that I'm still doing the same thing, so I don't take a step back and really like look at things sometimes.
Well, I want to bring you to a couple moments where maybe you were super present in those moments where maybe you were really appreciative. Because I know for me with this brand, like for instance, I started this podcast 7 years ago. And I always say that I had 10 ideas for shows. And then after that, I was on God's Good Humor. And I'll never forget, I interviewed Matthew McConaughey.
One of my favorite actors. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And I'll never forget, I was sitting on this couch back here that my huge dog is back there now. And I was just waiting for the interview to start. And my wife came into the office, and I was just kind of like going over my notes, and I was just in the zone, like kind of in the, business mode. And she just came in my office and just sat next to me. And she put her hand on my leg and she goes, "I'm really proud of you." And I was like, wow. I was like, "Why do you say that?" She goes, "You're 15 minutes away from interviewing Matthew McConaughey." She's like, "Our first date was seeing A Time to Kill when we were in college. Like, it's kind of iconic if you really think about it." And she's like, "And I remember when you started Dad Edge, and, you were nervous about where this was going to go and what you were going to do with it." And she's like, aren't you happy? Aren't you excited? Aren't you kind of proud of yourself?" And I'm like, and I didn't even think of it. I was like, I guess so. Yeah. I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess if you put it that way, like, this does feel really good. And maybe I should just take a moment and just be like, wow, this is just such, and not from like, oh, look at me, I'm awesome. Be like, holy cow, like, I can't believe that I get to do this. Like, this is just amazing, because I didn't come from anything either. Right. But have you ever, what moments in your life have you just sat back and were like, wow, I actually get to do this, or I actually get to talk to this person, or have dinner with these people, or whatever it is, that you were just like, man, this is so cool. This is my life.
Yeah, there's actually been two moments, and I was talking to one of my mentors about it. The first moment was when I started the company. We started out of San Diego, and the reason behind it was because my family didn't want to move to LA, and I wanted to move to LA, but my family didn't want to move to LA. So I said to myself, at the time I was working for a radio station, the biggest station here in San Diego. And when I one of the biggest perks working at the radio station was you get to meet all these artists, you get to work with all the major labels, and that's always the biggest perks, right? So when I left, I said, I'm going to make my company big enough so that I can be able to get those perks, right? And I'm also going to get the company big enough so that, because everybody would always say like, hey, it's going to be hard to get all those artists to come to your office, you being in San Diego. Nobody comes to San Diego. People come to LA, New York, the top 5 markets, right? And so what was it, like 2018, I'm sitting at the radio station with a couple friends, just hanging out, having lunch. And one of the on-air guys says, AROCK, and this is iHeartRadio. Hey, some of the artists that come here, we get some of the artists that come here come because they come to visit you guys. That was, to me, the eye opener of like, one, we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. This was granted 8 years later, but it was just kind of like wow, like I can't believe we actually did it. And then after that, I said, we're opening up LA. And we opened up our LA office a couple months later. But that was a moment of like, wow, we did it. We have the biggest artists coming. Because at the time, I mean, we had Chainsmokers, I mean, you name it, like the list goes on. T-Pain and big artists just coming to our office, walking down the hallways. You know, it was like, to them, it was like their safe zone, right? And it was really, really cool to see. At the time, we just didn't realize, like, wow, we have artists here in our space, like just walking around freely. Like, this is a big perk, but we were just hustling, working. We continued moving forward, and that was one moment for me. 8 years later, the second big moment, that was actually recently, 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, my dad passed away from COVID, and when he was in the hospital, I noticed that we were working hard on an integration with Pioneer DJ, which is Pioneer is one of the biggest companies and you know, globally when it comes to hardware and even, you know, electronics, right? So we were working on an integration that took 2 years to get the deal signed. And as my dad was in the hospital, like the deal got signed finally after like 2 years of negotiation, going back and forth on the integration, right? And that to me, it was a big moment because I realized, like, man, like, it wasn't so much of like if my dad would have been here to see that moment, but it was more like, because my dad was able to witness a lot of my wins, but it was more, wow, like this is the company that I started using when I first started DJing, and now my company's just signed an agreement for an integration software with one of the biggest companies in the world. Like, that to me was just shocking. It was that moment that it was like, wow, like we did it. Like we're here, you know, we're in the big leagues. So yeah, I mean, as I can recall, those were the two big moments, you know?
Wow, man, congratulations. That's
Thank you.
very surreal. It's so great. Just, I think when you're a type A, highly driven entrepreneur, business owner, very rarely, like the times where you just sit back, and sometimes it literally just feels like for a handful of seconds or maybe a handful of minutes where you just sort of pinch yourself and you're like, I can't believe it just happened. And then if you're a type A driven person, you're like, okay, and we got to keep this train going and keep moving. And what's the next thing? Right. But I think it's really important for people, and you don't have to be a high level business owner to do these things. I think you can be a family man, right? And be like, wow, because you get these glimpses of moments with your kids and with your wife and family. And you're just like, wow, I can't believe this is actually my life. Which, by the way, side note, so sorry to hear about your dad. Obviously,
Oh, no worries. Thank you.
yeah, unexpected loss.
Yeah.
Tell me about the relationship, you know, you had with your dad leading up, childhood and even leading up into adulthood.
Childhood, I want to say my dad was always easygoing too. Both of my parents were always lenient, like lenient with me, and they absolutely supported like what I wanted to do. It was when I was, you know, acting up, and they would bring up this is the reason why, you know.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for, you know, for my parents just supporting, like, I mean, I don't think I would have this career, because my dad would always buy me the equipment, and I would see, you know, the guys on MTV, what was it, Bad Boy Bill, doing the MTV Summerfest, and then I would look. I was always a guy that I would have, like, I would look at what they're using, and I would be like, well, if he's using the Y version, then I should be using the Y version of a mixer, you know? Like, I would pay attention to detail and compare it to what I was using. And I wanted to use what the big guys were using. And so my dad would always, you know, if I earned it, then he would support it, and he would buy it for me. So yeah, I mean, he was very supportive, like throughout the whole entire music career, you know? I just think it was shocking for him that it turned in what it did, you know. Because early on, at the age of 18, I was already working for a radio station, and so that was cool. That was cool for him. But it was not like what we're doing now.
Got it.
You know.
Yeah, yeah, you guys are on a whole new level. It sounds like your mom and dad were very supportive of you, as you said. I want to ask you about your boy. So you have one who's 12, correct?
I have a 12-year-old and then a 4-year-old.
Okay, 12-year-old and 4-year-old. It's quite a distance, actually. Side note,
It is.
Was this expected or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the 12-year-old, yeah, and the 4-year-old, yeah, both of them.
Okay, cool. But a side note, as far as your dad obviously raised a good young man, and you're raising young men. What are some of the life lessons that you maybe learned growing up? And it could be things to do, things not to do, that are most meaningful for you as you raise these young men, and obviously baby number 3 coming as well. But let's just talk about your sons right now. What's most meaningful for you to raise good young men that maybe you learned growing up?
My wife and I share similar traits when it comes to like how we got raised and all that. So I think that helps out a lot because we're both on the same page. Manners is a big one for us. Having manners, treating people with respect. If we go to it's the simple things it's the little things that matter. So like when we go when we're on a flight or whatever, like we make sure that they're very respectful, regardless on the seating. It doesn't matter. Like even when we go to a hotel, we make sure that, hey, clean up after yourself. Like, so we enforce a lot of those things, even here at home or wherever they're at. So we try to reinforce a lot of those things that oftentimes like, hey, you don't need to clean because there's a maid, or you don't need to clean the hotel because, there's a cleaning crew that's coming. To this day, like even myself, like I'll clean up my entire room, not only to make sure that I don't forget anything in the hotel room, but because I feel like it's me just saying, hey, like this is me just cleaning up after myself. Like I don't want to be that rude person and throw the towel and just say, doesn't matter, anybody, someone's gonna pick it up, So we try to teach our kids the same thing, and those are some of the traits that my parents and my wife's parents, have always reinforced.
We have a saying in this house, which is leave the space better than what you found it. That
That's a
way,
good one.
it's funny you mentioned the hotel room too, because like I remember this was years ago, and I can't remember which one of my boys actually said it because we travel with them quite a bit. But I was straightening up, throwing away our trash, like the empty coffee cups and like that kind of thing, and the stirs and like just random stuff, right? And I remember my son, I again, I can't remember which one it was, but he was younger at the time. He's like, well, Dad, he's like, housekeeping's coming. And I was like, yeah, but we still leave our space better than what we found it. Right. And just because housekeeping's coming, that doesn't mean that we leave them with a lot of work to do. Right. We're adults, or well, they weren't, but I'm an adult and I'm going to clean up after myself. And I always think of it as they're watching, right? And they're learning those things growing up. And what kind of lessons are we teaching them? Because whether it's a hotel room or whether it's your own room or whether it's somebody else's house, they're going to remember. I remember when Dad just left that one place just trashed, and it was like, oh, it's just somebody else will get it, so we're good there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that like everywhere we go, I mean, our kids are not, they're not the best kids in the world, right? But majority of the times, oftentimes, if we're at a store or something, like people would often say, like, "Wow, you guys are kids are well educated, and they have good manners." I don't know. I think it's just because we just try to just keep them aligned, like just show them, regardless on where we're at now in life, like we still want to teach them, the right things.
That's really cool, man. And those kind of things, they never go out of style. They just, they never do. I had a guy who was on not too a man who was on not too long ago. He's a Navy SEAL, and one of the things that he talked about was when his boys are out in public, you always open the door for a woman, and you always say ladies first and hold out your hand like that. And if you think about that, I remember growing up, and one of the men that my mom was married to, she was married a few times, but one of the guys that raised me between the age of 4 and 6, he was really big on manners. And I'll never forget him teaching me that lesson to open up doors for people, and thank you, yes sir, no sir, please. And that is something that we have really, really dialed in with our kids. And I love seeing our kids display those types of manners, because I don't see their friends doing it very often, but I see my boys doing it. Yes, please. Thank you. I appreciate that. Excuse me. And I think those are things that we shouldn't see die. But what else do you think is important? Sorry, that's my huge dog behind us that you hear somebody, but what else do you think is important as far as a life lesson goes?
I mean, that is for sure the big one, because I know like exactly what you just said. Like we're big on that. My 4-year-old's already holding the elevator, door, just for people to like get out and get in, and sometimes a little bit too long, but he learned that from us, right? So that I think the biggest thing is respect. I think respect just goes a long way in every different spectrum of life, right? So if they learn how to respect their mom, their dad, that's already a start, Nowadays, like, with all the kids and technology, like people don't spend too much time like teaching the kids that, like, so yeah, I mean, that's the big one. And just understanding that they got to spend time with family. They got to go out to dinners often with us, even if they don't want to, because, the 12-year-old's, he's about to be 13. So he's going to, I mean, you have a 14-year-old, so you know how they change real quick, and they're getting influenced by a lot of new friends at middle school. And next thing you know, they want to start doing the same thing. So we got to start reminding them.
I totally agree. Those are really, really important things. And, kids don't learn these lessons on accident. They learn because we're spending time with them. They learn because we're somehow, some way making sure that we're spending the time needed with them, the quality time needed with them. And one of the things that you and I talked about before we even jumped on this podcast that was really important to you was that balance and was that integration. Because I look at you as somebody who, you could be dialed into your business 27 hours out of the day and still not have enough time, right? Or still not get everything done, because people need something from you every minute of every day. But balance is something that is truly important to you. So how do you integrate the family quality time along with your business, balancing all the demands?
I mean, I want to say, like, I'm not perfect, so I'm not here to preach something that
Wait, you're not perfect. Wait, we only have perfect dads on this podcast. So like, you have to be perfect.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that for me, like, there was times where, like, for example, my 12-year-old, like, there was some time that I missed with him because I was too focused on the business. But that did help me realize. It helped me realize that, people say, like, how exactly what people say, like, time, you can never get it back, especially with children. Like, they grow up so fast. And now he's a teenager, and the time he wants to spend with me is very little. So I'm taking advantage of that, and I'm applying it to my 4-year-old. Like, as I'm in a different position now because now I'm at a point where my job consists more of either phone calls or just making decisions and just shooting it to the team and letting them know. So my time went from spending the 24, 27 hours a day to now it's just more, you know, 1 hour, 2 hours a day, but those 2 hours are good enough because I'm very fortunate for one to have an amazing team that's been with us for a very long time. So they understand the vision, they understand like the direction that we want to take the company and they're good at executing. So as long as you have a good team behind you, then I feel like you can accomplish a lot of things without having to put in the 20 hours a day, right? So that's allowed me to really utilize my time and do other things with, whether it's my wife or my family, So I know for a lot of people it's hard, right? It's hard when my wife and I always talk about this because I'm a big believer that to have a successful business, unfortunately, I don't think 8 hours is enough time, especially in the beginning stages. It's kind of like raising a kid and just giving them the time at the very beginning, like just a couple hours a day. Like, you know what I mean? Like you gotta have like full dedication and sometimes you can't have it all, right? So it's either you want to have, and you hear this through behind every success story, like there's always like, there's regress but it's like, what are you going to prioritize? It's hard. It is hard, but it's about how do you correct those mistakes? And I know you can't make up time, but at least now I know with my younger ones, like I try to spend the time with them, now that I have it. So
it's interesting. You and I are in a very similar season with our teenagers, and we also have younger kids. So I have 16, 14, 8, and 6. So it's right in line with, I have two teenagers that exactly that, right? They're busy with their activities. I've got one in football, one in band, school, there's friends, there's things that are on their radar that are much more important to them than when they were like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Right. And I've noticed the exact same thing that I do. I'm like, wow, I was like, I've gotten not only a glimpse, but firsthand experience of how short this time window is. I heard from another podcast guest not too long ago that 80% of our one-on-one time with our kids is gone by the time they're 12. What do you think of that?
That's true. I mean, and I think it's because they start experiencing, other things once they get to middle school. They start getting exposed to a whole nother world, I mean, their friends at school. They're the same age, so they're also experiencing new things, and so it's just a group of kids just trying to do new things, trying to be cool, trying to, and I think that's what it is. It's like once you get into middle school, it's completely different than elementary school. And like I said, my kid just started middle school probably 3 weeks ago. And we're seeing the changes like every day. I mean, he went from not wanting to, because we have to be on him about wanting to shower and all of that. And he went from he went from not wanting to shower to now he's like, hey, when you wake up to work out, which is around 5:30 a.m., he's like, can you wake me up so I can be able to get ready for school? So I said, oh, absolutely. Like without a doubt. But it's they change real quick. I was talking to one of my buddies that he has a 13-year-old daughter. He was saying at the age of 12, like they're changing so fast from 12 to 13. Like it's insane how fast they're changing.
That is exactly true. My my eighth grader who's going into freshman year this year, he even starting eighth grade, my wife sent me a photo of his first day of eighth grade. And then he just came upstairs yesterday. He's been playing football for 5 years, ever since he was in third grade. And he came upstairs. He texted me from the basement. He's like, "Hey, Dad, I just tried on my football uniform for high school." He's like, "I want to come up and show you." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And he came up here, and I looked at him, and I was like, "What in the world has happened to you? Like, over the years, like, you literally look like this intimidating monster beast of a young man, like, to the point where he and I got nose to nose, toes to toes, like, because I was like, let me look at you, like, let me actually look at you as if we were across the line from each other. I gotta admit, man, I mean, so I'm 175, I'm 170 pounds. He's 145. And I looked at him and I'm like, this dude could just completely would go right through me. I mean, I've seen it. I felt it because we wrestle and stuff like that. He's strong as an ox. And I was like, I still remember coaching his third grade team. And we took this photo where he was standing in front of me in his uniform. And I had my arms crossed on top of his helmet because he was that little. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what a crazy change. Like, and the eighth grade thing, right? So when he played eighth grade ball, just seeing the change he looks like now in a high school uniform, I'm like, geez, man, like, this is a totally different world. And it just changes like that before you even know it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to switch gears to just a couple of elements. I want to end the show with, you mentioned being a visionary, right, for the company, and really cool things to come out. I would love for you to share, like, what you're most excited about over, the next 12 months, over the next couple of years, that might be exciting for the listeners to hear about. But I also want to focus just a little bit on marriage. How long have you guys been married?
We've been married for 6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Going on 7. And we've been together for 11 years, going on 12.
Okay.
So,
and so let me ask you this. So you've been together, you said 12 years, going on 12 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's think about 13 years ago. Okay. Let's think about AROCK 13 years ago. I want you to imagine for a moment, you call yourself on the phone. Like, you just rip a hole in the space-time continuum, right? You call yourself 13 years ago. You're like, "Hey man, this is me from the future. I want to take you out to dinner. I'm going to sit down with you for an hour. I'm going to give you some advice, just some things to think about over the next 13 years. So you sit down, you meet yourself at dinner. Of course, you're awestruck. You're like, holy crap, I can't believe I'm talking to myself. You sit down, you're like, all right, AROCK, here's the deal, man. I'm going to give you some golden advice, 1, 2, or 3 things to really think about, to really put on your radar that I know, because I was you, that you ain't thinking about right now. What would you be telling yourself?
Business or just life in general?
Let's talk about marriage. Like, let's talk about relationship with the lady in your life.
Marriage, for one, I think most successful stories, there's behind every successful person, there's a strong woman that kind of keeps the guy in line, right? Because as you're building a business, you can't build a business and be, or at least in the beginning stages, you can't build a business and be worried about women, right? Especially if you're at a young age where all your friends are going out and partying, and you kind of have to have that checked off in a way. Like, okay, like, I got my lady, I got my number one supporter. Now let me focus on this. I can't focus on too many things at once. So that's a big one. I know many successful people, and most of them have, whether they're in a relationship now or not, that's a different story. But starting off, they had a woman in their life that kept them grounded, kept them aligned, and just kept them looking at the big price, right? So that's a big one for sure.
It's I want to challenge that a little bit. And challenging meaning I want to get more specific. I don't think you can have a good woman / good relationship with the woman in your life unless you're doing some of the right things. And the story that I'm telling myself is that you were probably, even though you were busy building the business, you were probably doing some of the right things, right? Probably some of the wrong things too, like the rest of us, but you were probably doing a few of the right things as well. And as you look back on those years, what were some of the right things that you did?
The right things with her or
Yeah,
just in general?
with her.
I think it goes back to just spending that, making sure that regardless at the end of the day, you have to make time with other people, right? And giving them that time, treating people with respect. So when my wife and I got together, I was in the process of just getting the business started. She didn't know what I was trying to build. She just knew that I was working on something, and that's all she knew. And but she was extremely agile and adapted. Like once the business started, like taking off, like she was very hands on with helping on whatever I needed, because at the time when we first started it, I was answering emails, editing music, I was communicating for customer service, like I was doing everything, as you can imagine. And yeah, and she was helping out. So my wife was there at the beginning of everything. Um, but I think to answer your original question, I think I knew that it doesn't matter. Like if I was busy trying to build a business, I still need to give her that quality time and spend time with her to win her over, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's what I really want the listeners to hear, and I think what really just emerged. You tell me if you think I'm wrong. Is you made time for both, and you were intentional with both. I think
Yeah.
a woman will not be supportive of a man, of his ventures, of his business, or his time unless she feels seen, heard, and safe. And it sounds like what you really did a great job of, probably whether you knew it at the time or not, is you were carving out that time to make sure that she had those three needs met. Because a woman who has those three needs met, she will be supportive, or I can't, you can't forecast the future for everybody, but I would say the odds are stacked in your favor that she
Hmm.
will most likely have tendencies to be supportive, right?
Right.
Which I think that's incredible. Um, from a business perspective, what are you most excited about as you look to 12 months out, 18 months out?
Well, what we're excited is when we started is we were a music company for DJs. We were providing music for DJs, and as we started just really like paying attention to the market and just realizing that we were in a very specific, very small niche. Um, we realized like we want more. We want a bigger audience. We want more customers, and we keep getting number one 4 years in a row, right? Like, what's next? So that's when we started looking at other spectrums of the music business, and we started realizing that the producer space was also big, and most DJs were transitioning into making music, and vice versa. Producers were transitioning into performing their own music. So that's when we realized, like, okay, there's other products that we can develop. We don't have to be just a music provider for DJs. We can now provide sounds for producers. So we started developing that, and as we're developing that product, I started to realize that the music space it's a huge space. Everybody loves music. There's people wanting to be in the music industry every single day, whether it's a songwriter, a producer, a DJ, uh, or you're simply wanting to discover music, right? For whatever it is that you're doing. And so I'm really proud of what we're building, because what we're building at BPM is we're creating a suite of products for musicians all around. And so what we're doing is not only do we have the sounds for producers, we got the place for DJs to get the music. But we're also going to be launching BPM Sync, which it'll be a library of royalty-free music for people utilizing music for their podcasts, their videos, any of that. And so really here, the easiest way to understand what we're building is we're building the Adobe of music. That's the easiest way. So when I tell people that, like, they instantly get it, they're like, oh, wow, there is no company out there that's, at least right now, that's really carving into every different spectrum and creating a suite of products that work within each other and create a cool community for musicians.
That is so cool, man. I might know a podcaster or two out there that would really love to have, some resources like that.
Me too.
I just have one more question for you. And this is just more of a personal thing. As you look back on your life, 35 years old, you and I both grew up on music and musicians and different types of music that have meant, things to us. And once you are operating at a decent level and you get to interact with certain people, you're like, wow, like this is pretty cool. So like last year, I had the opportunity to interview Nikki Sixx, founder of Motley Crue. And I'll never forget that. I mean, it was really exciting to me because it literally brought me back to like 8th grade when Dr. Feelgood came out. And I was like, I can't believe, like, I remember being in 8th grade, like buying the cassette tape for Dr. Feelgood. And I was like, and I get to talk to Nikki Sixx today. As you look back on your life and some iconic stars that you've been able to interact with that were meaningful for you back in the day, like what iconic stars have you been able to meet? And you're like, man, this is so cool. Like I remember listening to you when I was a freshman in high school, like something like that.
Oh, there's actually been so many of those moments. So many, I can't even think of one right now, but it happens because a lot of the art, like a lot of the DJs or artists, they're fans of our product, and so they instantly become my friends. And I mean, there was one who I consider a close friend of mine now, by the name of DJ Ski. He's an entrepreneur into the NFT space, into he trades cards, CEO and founder of Dash Radio, worked for iHeart for many, many years. So you name it. And he was somebody I looked up as a DJ, because growing up, because he was an entrepreneur. Like he didn't just DJ, he actually had many different ventures going on. And when I reached out to him, he got back to me instantly. He said, oh my God, I'm a fan of your product. I would like to meet you. And then that turned into a very close relationship. We're now close friends. And it's just crazy to see how many doors have opened up and how many people I've met throughout the years that, because of what I built, has allowed me to establish those relationships with them. It's insane. And like you name it, like touring DJs, award-winning producers, I hear it all the time. So yeah, that kind of goes back to like when you realize like, wow, like you don't realize like what you've built up until like all these other people start telling you, so.
That's cool, man. Very cool. And, okay, congratulations on all your success. I mean, a lot of people see the rewards of a successful person, like they see them once they've hit, a certain level. They have no clue what it took to get there. Like there were some beat downs and there were some hours logged and there were some reps put in that you had to do. Like you served a lot of time doing what you're doing. And hey, it's been an honor meeting you, man. I've actually been a fan, of what you've been doing for quite some time. And it's been great talking to you. And hey, congratulations on your new arrival as well, coming soon.
Thank you. No, it's an honor to be part of the podcast, and yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. Like I said from the beginning, and thank you for having me.
You bet, my man. And just so the listeners, if they want to connect with you, follow you on social, what's the best way to do that?
It's just at AROCK, AROCK.
Okay.
Easy enough, yeah. Like sometimes I get like people ask me questions. They're like, "Hey, how did you get that Instagram handle? Like it's just short, and nowadays as social media is growing, like it's very hard to get like a short name or any of that,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Does your wife call you A-Rock or does she call you Angel?
No, she calls me Angel, but well, she calls me Babe, but
Yeah.
Angel. Um, but yeah, majority of the people call me A-Rock.
Very cool.
Close friends of mine call me Angel just because they're used to it from growing up. But yeah,
Very cool.
but I always introduce myself to people as Angel.
Yeah.
I just let them know like that's my name. If you want to call me by my real name, sometimes people feel more connected if they know your
Sure.
real name, right? So
Yeah, if you meet somebody who, doesn't know you or, you introduce yourself, you're like, okay, okay.
yeah, I get that. I got that yesterday.
Yeah.
But so is it Angel or A-Rock? Because everybody calls you A-Rock, and I just throw it out there. I just, I like people to know my name as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it, man. It goes back to what we talked about in the beginning is like these super humble beginnings, and the things
Yeah.
is grounded. So, really, really have enjoyed this. Guys, we're going to have all the links in the show notes if you want to connect with A-Rock and obviously follow him on social and all the great things that are coming out for BPM. All you have to do is head on over to thedadedge.com/386 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/386. A-Rock, this was awesome, man. I wish you nothing but the best and continued success. Keep doing what you're doing, man.
Likewise, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.